Well guys, spring is in the air, it's warming up. It may not feel like it at the moment, it's pretty cold today, but spring is in the air, all the leaves are coming out, the birds are singing and the fish are responding. This is a brilliant time of year to catch fish down the edge. So let's get to it and show you guys how to catch loads of fish down the edge this spring. Welcome back to the channel everyone, and the first thing I've got to do is thank everyone who's watched, liked, commented, subscribed lately. The views have been amazing. I've been putting a bit of extra effort in, going out on an evening, stuff like that, getting little videos for you guys, and it's paying off. You know, loads of you guys are writing to me saying how much you're enjoying it, so thank you very much for that. Now today I finished work and I've come over to Shrewsbury Valley just for a really quick hour edge fishing session. Now last week obviously it was boiling hot, there was fish starting to be active, and then we've had a real cold spell. I mean, this week's been mad. We've had snow, we've had all sorts of weird and wonderful weather this week. But the fish know that spring's in the air. You know, we've got long daylight hours now. You know, they've had a taste of warm weather, they've been up on the top cruising and stuff, and they really want to get feeding. So even though it's cold, I do fully expect to catch some fish in the edge. Now, the margins is somewhere, especially here, you know, I spend a lot of time here, and a lot of the match weights are made up of margin fish. And that's obviously in the height of summer when the fish want to come right in the bank. You can often see them tailing up and all that business. But that's not really what's going to be the case here today. Now we're looking at springtime margins, and it needs quite a bit of thought, to be honest with you. We're looking at fishing in slightly deeper water, smaller quantities of bait, different rigs, and obviously that all important timing, as in the time of day to be in the edge. So let's get on with it. Without further ado, let's get on with it, and we'll get plumbed up first because that's really important. So we'll get the plummet on and let's go have a look at the two spots that I've chosen to fish. Right, so the first thing we need to talk about is plumbing up and swim choice. Now here in the summer especially, the fish are willing to come into right in the edge, close, in the edge, tailing up, fantastic. Obviously the water's cold, there's a bit of clarity in the water. The fish just aren't going to be up in that shallow water just yet. They will come up in shallow water, so I'll talk to you about that in a moment. But for the main part, we're looking to try and target slightly deeper water away from the bank a little bit. So I've set this rig at 3 foot. I'm going to use a nice heavy 30-gram plummet to find my first spot of the day. So what I'm sort of looking to do, I'm fishing at about 12 metres, not quite 13 metres, and I'm going to fish in front of the next platform. This rig I fully expect to be a metre, maybe a metre and a half off the bank. And I don't know if you see, but there's like a lovely gradual slope in this fishery. It's really nice. I'm going to have a little plumb around, just go out there, and it sort of creeps up, sort of in inch increments really, about a metre and a half off the bank, and it's just coming up. It's coming up all the time. So what I'm going to do, I've picked 3 foot as like a starting point really, and I found a lovely sort of gradual slope there. It's bang in line with an aerator as well, so I've got a lovely marker. I can lay my rig out down the slope and sort of, just like I did in the last few videos, you'll see me do that loads in fishing. I swing it out away from the slope, let it sort of settle in, and I can always be fishing on a tight line, if you know what I mean, because I'm fishing I'll show you the rigs in a moment, but fishing a strung out rig and everything's sort of there, nice. So because I'm fishing a nice heavy bait like corn today, that's going to register nicely on the float. Probably fish just there where it's bottom of my float body, bang in line with that aerator. I can fish that so accurately. I've got my little mark here, I'm right on the second blue bit of the graphics, so I'm perfect there. Now that 3 foot, it allows me to do a few things. I can flick it past, I can flick it down the slope. I can really play with that, so I'm happy with that. However, there are times, and it will happen today, I'm sure of it, if the fish come in, where you get times in your match where, yes, this is where I'll catch most of my fish, I'm sure of it. I may have to go a little bit shallow, I may have to take 6 inches off that and go a little bit further up the slope. But there'll be no doubt, fish are really unpredictable, especially in the spring. And just because it's cold to us, and you think, and I've been guilty of this so many times in my life, where I think, oh, it's cold today, they'll only come in 3 foot of water, they won't go in any shallow water than that. It's sometimes not the case. And I'll just let you know an example. I went on my first open match since lockdown last week at Yoke Hill Farm. I come second in the match, good result. However, the lad who won caught nearly 60 pound, a big carp down the edge. Now I fed down the edge, but I was guilty of thinking, oh, they're only going to come in 3.5 foot of water today, because that's what I was catching in against the island. So I was content to fish in front of the next platform where it's 3.5 foot deep, rattling some 4 mils, and I caught some fish, but albeit small ones. Now Gary, who won, fished in the shallower water, big potted, and a few people big potted right in the edge and caught some big fish. And I never even gave myself that option because I totally wrote it off, because it was snowing when we got there in the morning, and I just thought there's no way on earth that the fish are going to come in that shallow water. They did, and I was caught out a bit by that. So I'm going to set up a rig that's probably 20 inches deep. I've not measured it, but I think it's roughly that, 20 inches. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to plumb up a spot much tighter into the edge. So this is where, you know, you've got to see how the match progresses, because it may just be that I use that 3 foot rig and just catch on it nice and steady, but I know what the fish are like here. They love that shallow water. So what I've got that right against the platform. It's really nice actually. Obviously it's a bit deep in front of these platforms. Bottom's nice and clean, because you've got to remember people are using keep nets here, and it cleans the bottom out a little bit. So these little so-called keep net holes, it gives you that sort of 20 inches right against the bank, and that float will just sit there lovely. Really nice spot to fish that is. It's flat. I'm really happy with that. And it may be that I only go up there in the last 10 minutes of my match or last 10 minutes of my session. I might not even feed it. I'll carry on feeding in my hot spot, which is my 3 foot line. And it may be that I'm getting so many liners that I can just sneak a little bit of bait in with a little cad pot up into that shallow water and go on it really late in the session, and I might just catch 1 or 2 munters right up there. And when you think there's fish in here to 20 pound now, you know, if I catch 1 of them last chuck in, then obviously it's going to make a big difference. So even though my plan and my whole mindset is about catching in 3 foot of water, I've also got this rig ready to go as a backup in case the fish, or there is an opportunity, should we say, to go in that shallow water and catch them. So let's have a little look at the rigs in a moment, and we'll get on and catch some fish. Right, so let's have a look at the rigs. Now the rig for the sort of 3 foot is a 4x10 carp pellet. So it's got a nice 2 mil bristle and that night eye wire stem. Actually, last week when I was fishing the match, I used the F1 maggot like I was doing in the last video at Yoke Hill, and I actually switched to this during the match. I went up, there was a skimmy wind on it, and I switched to this, and I couldn't believe the difference in stability. So it's a float I used a lot last summer, and for some reason I went away from it, but I've gone on to this 4x10 F1 carp pellet, 3 foot, and then I've got my number 10s in a line there. Now the last one is probably 10 inches from the hook, which is obviously a little bit unusual for carp fishing these days. Everyone likes to get everything really close to the hook and stuff like that, but because I'm going to use corn on the hook, big baits, I don't really necessarily need it that close to the hook because I'm always in touch with it anyway. I can always move it closer, but to be honest with you, there's no need for the time being. It's on 018 AccuPower mainline, and then I've just got an 014 AccuPower hook length to a 16 GPM. Nice and simple really. I've got a 13 Jura slip this time. I used the 10 Jura hollow last time, but I'm going to use 13 Jura slip. I am expecting to catch a few nice fish today. I want to be in control, and what you've got to remember is we're talking margin fishing here, which often happens late in the day. So it stands to reason that I do need a little bit stronger tackle on than what I probably normally use, to be fair. I probably wouldn't mind using an 11 here today, but I want to give myself, you know, a good chance of getting fishing pretty quick. Another month's time I'll be on 15. One thing you might have noticed, it's flat calm today, there's no ripple cover at all, so I've got probably 2 foot of line between my float and my pole tip. That's just so I can get my pole tip off the water a bit, get it away. It might not make any difference whatsoever, but in my head it does. I've got on a nice bulk of number 8 stots there as a back shot. For the shallow water, much more of a traditional sort of commercial rig as it were now. I've got a 4x14 carp shallow, lovely little dumpy float, and then I've just got a bulk of number 8s there, probably 5 inches from the hook. So that is obviously much more of a nail it in the shallow water. I might get a little bit of turbulence there, so I need the heavy float to keep it still. Again, I've got the long line between pole float and pole tip, and the bulk of number 8s as a back shot. So that's it, again 13 Jura slip, so 2 rigs. All my feed today is going to be introduced by pole pot, and by that, like different types of pole pot. So to keep my swim off, I'm going to use the big pot. you know, it's going to allow me to introduce a nice little dollop of bait there, nice and accurately. I've got a hole in the bottom which allows the bait to sort of flush out. But I'll probably just top up with that as and when. You know, in a match I'd probably be fishing other lines, so I can just quickly ship out with this and feed the swim. However, when I'm fishing, I want to top the swim up and set a trap every single time. So I've got 3 different pots here. So when you're fishing at this time of year and you're sort of looking to catch some spring carp in the edge, sometimes you need to actually play about with your pot size to get the fish competing in the edge. Some days you can put the small one on, tap a few micros in or a bit of ground bait, and you'll catch fish all day long. But other days that's not enough, it's not enough bait. Some days you need to actually force the fish into the margins, if that makes sense. And often, you know, a decent amount of ground bait or a decent amount of micros potted in regular can really like get the activity going in the swim. So I'm always like looking to switch pot size as I go through the session. So the medium one, for example, if I'm not getting any response whatsoever, I'll start on the small one, and if I'm just not getting any signs, then I'll put the medium one on. And again, if I'm not really getting any signs, or it's clear that the fish want more bait, then I won't hesitate to put the big one on. It's all about juggling, and then if it goes mad, I'm getting too many signs, too many liners, then I'll scale it back down a pot size. It's all about just getting the perfect amount of bait in the swim to get you a nice clean bite before all the madness and liners happen. Because even though it's cold, and even though, you know, it's going to happen late in the day, the fish will come in and they will be quite aggressive, especially at certain times. So you've just got to have the right amount of bait in the swim to set the perfect trap, if that makes sense. It might be that it's the small one, or it might be that it has to be the big one. But I'm always looking to maybe swap my pot size. If I go in, like I say, I'll start with that one, introduce a little bit of bait, and it works, then great, I'll just keep going with that one. But it may be that I have to introduce a couple of medium ones and then go back to the small, or maybe a couple of big ones and then go back to the small. It's all about just working it out on the day, how much bait you can get away with and still get a nice clean bite. End of the day, you don't want no foul hook fish. So by all means, you know, use the large pot, but if it gets to the point where you're foul hooking fish, then drop a pot size or drop 2 pot sizes and then carry on. And that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to juggle our pot sizes and make the most of this sort of 3 foot of depth. Bait choice is quite simple today. I've got 2 options with feed. I've got micros and I've got Power Scopex ground bait. Lovely fluffy ground baits, lovely that is. Now, you may think, why have I got both? There's been a big trend lately of going away from ground bait and just using micros, and you know, I'm all for that at certain times, but there is no doubt in my mind that on some days ground bait is just way more attractive to the fish than pellets will ever be. Now, don't get me wrong, they love eating micros, and hopefully I'll just tap in micros today and get a response. But I'm all too aware that in my head that some days you'll pop micros in, it just won't happen, but yet you'll pot in a small amount of ground bait and they'll come straight on it. So just have that in mind. You don't need a lot. I've got probably a pint of micros and a pint of mixed up Power Scopex there, and that's all you need. Now, when it comes to doing the micros, you might be able to see that they're fully blown up pellets. They are. They're really nice. I've done them really nicely. And all I did was, when I got up this morning, I knew I was coming this evening. So when I got up this morning, so if it was a match, I'd probably do it the night before. But because I knew I was coming here this evening, I wanted to make sure my bait was ready, so I just put in a pint of pellets, probably half a pint of dry pellets, in a bowl, just covered them with water, so they're just poking through the water, you don't want them flooded, and just left them. And then every now and again I've shook them up throughout the day. When I've been at work, I've just been shaking them up, just to get the water back on top of them and get the moisture back on top of them. And then you get a lovely, they probably can't take up any more water than that without them turning into a mush, so they're lovely. They're going to come out the pot nice and they're going to remain as individual pellets. The ground bait is just, I've just mixed it to a lovely fluffy consistency. Look at that, beautiful. Now the only other bait I've got for the hook is corn. I've just got some of the banoffee corn there. I'm not too fussy. I just like the fact that there's some nice small grains in there. You know, I can put multiples of small grains on. It's quite nice. Obviously it smells nice too. So that's it, really simple. I know that I'll probably start on the micros, see how it goes, and then if it's not happening, I will introduce some ground bait. So let's get the swims fed and get some fish caught. Right, so we ran you through the approach, and it's time to get going now. Now, all I'm going to do, I'm just going to kick off with I'm just going to cover the bottom of the pot with micros to start with. I just want to see what happens. Now it's heading to the right time of day now. It's in the evening, so I'd expect a quick response, and that is what I want to talk to you about as I'm doing this. is the importance of timing. Now, by all means, if you draw a special peg on an end or something like that, a nice end peg, then you might go in down the edge early in the day and catch some fish. But, as my great friend Rob Wootton just accurately pour that in there, I'm not making any excess noise or anything like that at the moment. I just want to attract some fish. While that's sort of settling, one thing that my great friend Rob Wootton, I saw him do it in the Dreaded Knockout Cup many years ago, and I twigged it. He never told me this, but I twigged it. It was an edge fishing day at Cudmore, and they fished the method all day. And it was one of those days where I thought, he needs some edge fish here, but he's leaving it too late, or it felt like he was leaving it too late. But what I saw him do, everyone else had been feeding it and priming it, and they were going in, and it wasn't really happening for them. Rob waited until literally the 11th hour, say the match finished at 4. He didn't feed it until probably 20 past 3. He fed it with one pot of bait and then went straight on it and caught one straight away. And I spoke to him afterwards, and his theory was, you know, what's the sort of point in feeding it before am I ever going to fish it? Because I'm just feeding fish that I'm not catching. The fish will naturally be in the edge at the right time of day. If you get your timing right, the fish will be there. They're not coming there because you fed them. They're coming there, you know, because they want to be there. And you'll see that in matches where you're fishing out your normal approaches, your normal methods, and then the fish will like naturally sort of mooch around here. And it's because they want to be in the edge, they want to be in the shallow water to feed. And it's stuck me ever since that, you know, even though I'm sort of looking to catch in the edge, I don't ever prime it and leave it for half an hour or anything like that. I'll literally feed it and I'll go straight on it. And if I've got my timings right, then I can expect a response pretty quick. So hopefully, that being said, even though it's spring, I would expect that to be the case. So I've not, again, my net's dry, so this is all in real time. I'm just going to put a single grain of corn on. I would expect a few F1s maybe to start with, but we'll take it a little bit at a time. Just a nice sort of thumb of micros in there, and we'll get in there and try and build a swim. Hopefully, we'll catch some fish. It has been cold this week though, so you can't promise anything. So on my marker, I'm going to flick that rig out, and I'm just going to accurately pop them pellets right on my mark, just like that. Nice. And I'm going to drag that piece of corn up the slope, just like that. And hopefully it won't take us too long to catch one. But yeah, that's stuck ever since that happened. I saw that happen to Rob, and how he sort of, oh, we had an indication there straight away. So ever since I seen that happen to Rob that day, it sort of stuck with me, and it's really sort of changed my approach of edge fishing. Because what was happening, I remember at the time, it was when ground bait was very much the in thing, and we were having to feed 3 and 4 kilos of ground bait throughout a match, and it was like, it got silly because we were feeding it and feeding it and feeding it without actually fishing it. Whereas Rob, probably being a bit tight, went back to the drawing board almost, and realised that it was more about being in the edge at the right time, as opposed to being in the edge or fishing the edge when the fish are out in the lake still. So just bear that in mind. You know, you need to think about being in there at the right time. And obviously it's coming late in the day now. Even though it's cold, I would expect the fish to mooch in there. It might take a few feeds just to get a few fish going, but if you've got your timings right, you'll get signs pretty quick that fish are in the edge. There we go. That didn't take long at all, did it? So first chuck that. Only a small fish though, as expected. Probably catch a few F1s to begin with, before the carp sort of susses out a bit. But I'm all that happy to catch what comes today. Nice little F1. There we go. And it may, but this is where, obviously, as we've discussed about the pot sizes, it may be that little pot isn't enough food. If there's a lot of them feeding, them little F1s, it may be that that's just not enough food for them big carp to come in. So, but this is how you learn, you know, you're fishing away, making decisions as you go. It's not set in stone by any means. Another couple of grains of corn there, and a nice dollop of micros. And again, it might be that the carp want ground bait. So I've got that in the back of my mind also. But we'll get in right on that mark again, be nice and accurate. Nice little pile of bait, right on my, in line with that aerator rang in the middle of it, and then that'll lay my float down the slope, and then it'll swing back in, and the corn will be nicely sort of, it'll find it's where it needs to be because it's heavy and I'm in perfect contact with it. So as soon as a fish nudges it or takes it or whatever you want to call it, I will get an indication. But that was good. It just shows you, doesn't it, that, you know, it's a cold day and I've gone in there, first drop in, and I've had a sign straight away, so that's nice. As far as hook baits are concerned, obviously I've just gone with corn today. I'm just doing this as like, it's a quick session, but corn is obviously a brilliant hook bait at all times of the year, especially in the edge because it's heavy, so it plays into your, you know, it plays into your hand. You can anchor it against a slope or anchor it in spots. It stays on the bottom well. But obviously you've got maggots, live or dead, can be brilliant in the edge as a hook bait. I'm not a big fan of feeding dead maggots, I've got to be honest. I know a lot of people have great success doing that, but it's never been the one for me. Oh, there we go. Another F1. But corn, meat is a good one. You know, a nice bit of meat can be a good hook bait this time of year. You don't even have to feed any meat, you can just use a bit of meat on the hook. Obviously a nice big worm, a big dendra. Nice F1. That's a nice one. Nice bit of that banoffee corn, nice fish. Yeah, just play about with your hook baits. Have a few options if you want to, but I'm more than happy fishing corn. Even an expander can be good in certain situations, but when I'm fishing for carp, I do like corn. A bit of meat can be really effective. So I'm just going to stick with the micros for now. And then, as an experiment, we'll start introducing some ground bait soon and see what difference it makes. Mark, get that bit of bait in, nice and accurate. You can see it all falling out because I've prepared my pellets right. They're not sticky at all, they're fluffy and big. I can see it. I dip my pole tip in the water and I can just see it falling out in a wanna, which is exactly how you want it. Obviously the real good commercial guys speak a lot about that, and it's definitely the case. Definitely right, that is. It's where these pots with like holes in the side, like the cad pots have got, and other pots have got them as well, like pots in the holes in the bottom, holes in the side. It just lets the water get in and pull the bait out for you. So although those holes may look a little bit funny, they're there for a reason. There you go. Another F1, they're on me now. I'm more than happy to catch these though, for the time being, until the carp turn up. So I'm gonna, as promised, I'll put some, just a little F1 this time. Hole's rolling away from me, which is annoying. As promised, I'm gonna put some ground bait in this chuck and just see what the difference is. Stick with this amount, but we may have to up it, put that next pot size on. Let's just see. Nice bit of Power Scopex, lovely and fluffy that. Smells beautiful. So let's get on the ground bait. Just going to do it exactly the same. Back on the mark. Nice. So there might be that the F1's going mental for that, to be honest with you, especially this stamp. They love ground bait. It smells beautiful. Stop smelling it. So let's see what response that gets. The carp do like ground bait in here. There we go. Another F1. So I'm just gonna keep ringing the changes with the bait. I'm gonna keep building the swim, and then hopefully we'll pop back in a little while. Some carp will be feeding, and we can show you how maybe sneaking up into that shallow water will catch us some more fish. Okay, so we just did that sort of chunky F1, and just sort of getting the feeling that maybe there is an opportunity to catch a couple of carp in that slightly shallower water. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put in a little, just a, I don't know, third of a pot up in that shallow water, and I'm just going to leave it for 5 minutes. Got a little, been messing about, just practicing really, on a little short pole hard pellet swim. So I'm just going to accurately put that ground bait in. Just give it a few minutes. I'm going to have a little mess about on this short pole for a few minutes, and then hopefully within sort of 5 minutes we'll be down the edge, snaring a few lumps in that shallow water, because just away from the bank it just feels like they just want to be in shallower water. So we'll give that a few minutes and then we'll be right back catching some carp hopefully. Okay, so we've had a little mess about fishing in front of me on different things. Like I say, I like to come and sometimes like some short sessions and work on things for my own fishing. Just been having a little play with pellets short, catching some F1s and stuff. So I'm just going to put on a nice big grain of corn. I've gone for the medium cad pot to start with. I feel like I'm going to have to feed a decent amount of bait initially, just to try and make something happen really in this shallow water, because it's so flat today. It's definitely not fishing very well, and I feel like just setting a relatively good sized trap will be the way to go. So just, it's a bit awkward, there's a bit of a sedge, but we'll just pop that bait in and lift that bait rig right on top of it, and then just be nice and patient. A bit tricky to see, but we should be okay. There. Nice. Well, I think it is. Right, it's now a case of being patient. I'm fishing up in shallow water where the fish might not necessarily want to be. There we go. So, moved up into that shallow water, and we've actually hooked one. First chuck, which I wasn't expecting at all, but it just shows you that sometimes, it's not a big fish, but a carp bow waved out when I hooked this one. So I wasn't expecting that at all. A nice big F1, look at that. So even though we've gone in shallow water, the F1, I mean, that's probably 2.5 pound, that one. Look at that, lovely. Right in the top lip, perfect. So that's a great sign. You know, we've gone in, we fed it once, up in that shallow water, we've set a trap, and we've had a sign. So just not quite happy with how that float's sitting, so I'm just going to put another number 10 on. That's a good sign, that is. And like I say, a fish definitely bow waved out from the margin when I hooked that one as well. You know, looked carpy. So let's hope that this is the answer. Say, not always that fishing in that sort of 3 foot, it's not always the way in spring. You know, it's cold today. It was only 6 degrees when I pulled in at the fishery, and the textbooks would have you believe that you need to fish in deeper water, but it's not always the case. So just accurately create that little pile, baits come out, baits release nice, put that 4x14 float right on top of it, and then sort of wait for the action really. A bit tricky here. Like I say, there's a sedge between me and the fishing position. It's really, I always find it interesting, this sort of fishing. You know, in the height of summer, this would be chaos down here, potting baiting like this, tails and stuff, but it's just not like that obviously in spring. Fish are still sort of warming up, and it can be all about, just like I say, setting yourself your little trap and waiting, being patient. And it's, you know, if it was a pound F1 or a £10 carp, it doesn't matter. It's all about doing it right, hitting your bite, coming back with a fish on. Yeah, there we go. That feels better. Yeah, that's a carp. So I was just sat there, it was just real nice and patient. And it's actually happening quite nicely now. We've got 13, he's just streaming out the pole tip. We've just, you know, we've had them few F1s and it didn't actually look like there's any carp feeding. But this one's come pretty quick after feeding that last pot full of bait. Lovely fishing. I just love it. I love catching in the edge. It's just brilliant. Take our time. It's taken us a while to get this one, so last thing we want to do is rush. But that 13 is just magnificent. Good fish. And again, there's not been any signs, there's not been any tails show or anything. That fish has obviously just snuck up the slope, found my little trap, had himself a little munch, thought, oh, cherry on top, nice bit of corn, and I've nailed him. So just shows you. It's a good one as well. I've got that 0.14 hook length on. You know, another month's time I'll be on 0.16. It's a good one. Yeah, look at that. Nice, proper edge fished to end this little video on. Look at that. Munter. Right, let's have a look at you. Certainly £8 of anyone's money, that. Wouldn't have even known it was there. Just brilliant fishing. Don't forget to subscribe, like and comment as always, and we'll see you again on the next one.